Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the Blog Cabin to chat about life. And today I'm very happy to welcome a fellow North Carolinian. You grew up in the western part of the state, Ski. He is here to talk about his book, There's Another Way to Happiness. But before we start talking about your book, Ski, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, as you said, Melissa, I did grow up in rural North Carolina. I started out in a house without a bathroom on the North Carolina-Virginia border on an 8-acre tobacco farm. It's been an incredible life. I don't know how it happened. I was severely dyslexic and couldn't read coming out of high school, and then somehow was a good athlete. Got into college because I was a good athlete, but then things started happening really quickly, and got a PhD in biochemistry in record time, and then trained with a Nobel Prize winner, and then was a professor at Johns Hopkins and Wake Forest and University of Colorado, and now I'm at the University of Arizona in Tucson. So I don't know how any of this happened. I really, really don't. It just all seems like a big old miracle, and perhaps it is a big old miracle. It seems like a big miracle to me.
Yeah, I mean, you've accomplished a lot in your life. Looking back, like you said, you don't know how it happened, but looking back, did you ever think in the beginning that that certain pathways would lead you to where they are right now? Because I know in your book you talk about a lot of the difficulties that you had, especially when you're dyslexic.
Yeah. No, and I think that's one of the things that I really emphasize is a trust that you are where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. And whether that trust comes from your connection with the divine, or whether it comes from your connection with the universe, whether it, again, whatever the connection, but it's this trust. Because as you know in the book, I'm so against planning. And I can't even imagine if someone had asked that little boy, or even that teenager on that tobacco farm, what he wanted to do when he grew up. It would have never, ever even come close to this. So we are in a river. We're in a beautiful river, and that river is meandering, and at times the river is going really fast, and sometimes it's class 5 rapids, and it's beating the hell out of us. But it is a river, and it's headed to a sea, and it's heading to purpose, and it's heading to meaning, and it's heading to loving the world. And however that manifests itself, we have to have trust in the river.
Yeah, so let's talk about your journey to trusting your river, because you even said a couple of times, especially when you were actually at your job that you are now, that you would have to take long walks and just sit underneath a tree and meditate because you still weren't feeling happy. So let's talk about that.
Well, that's the big misconception. The big misconception is happiness is natural.
Mm-hmm.
And happiness is not natural. And the reason it's not natural, now I'm going to turn into a scientific nerd for a second, and please forgive me for that. But
Go for it.
we have these two minds within our brain. And there's two minds that are competing for our attention at any given time. The one that's most dominant is our unconscious mind, unless we've developed mindfulness. And it's built for survival and protection. It remembers the past. Its job is to remember the past. It remembers childhood trauma. It's absolutely focused on the future and controlling the future. It doesn't allow loneliness, because loneliness meant that you were getting kicked out of the tribe. This unconscious mind had one job, and that was you to get your DNA, your genes, to the next generation. And in fact, it didn't care if you were happy. And in fact, it wanted you not to be happy. So every sad and difficult emotion you have can almost be traced back to that unconscious mind, and we don't even know what that mind is saying. So for me, coming up dyslexic in rural North Carolina, I was put in a white building, and over the building, it said, and I'm going to use a bad word, but it said retarded building. And I was put in that building for 3 years because I couldn't read, and that's where the misfits went. And I couldn't read coming out of high school, and that created a whole world of unworthiness. It created a whole world of rejection. And I have a 52-page resume. And no matter how large that resume became, there wasn't enough I could do on that resume to get rid of that feeling of unworthiness and rejection. With each mountain I climbed, there seemed to be a bigger mountain in front of me. And I'm convinced I could have won a Nobel Prize in medicine and probably was doing things close to that. And I would have never run away or escaped that feeling of unworthiness or that feeling of rejection that came from that childhood trauma. There were other childhood traumas. There was some abuse, some sexual abuse. There were other childhood traumas, but they all build up and they're all in us. And our unconscious mind is constantly shouting, "You're not worthy. You're going to be rejected. You're this is you've got to control the future. You've got to focus on that past, or it's going to happen again." And that's a recipe for unhappiness.
So how do we get past that feeling of we're not worthy?
Well, I think that's where mindfulness comes in. I mean, I'm a basic biochemist and geneticist. There's not a person who poo-pooed mindfulness more than me 8 years ago. But last year in the scientific literature, there were 950 articles or so on mindfulness. There were 200 clinical trials. Mindfulness has become main stage, not only in kind of the mindfulness circles, but in science. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is waking up. It's waking up to the fact that you have this going on in your head, and it ain't easy, and you've got this constantly, and your mindfulness stops and monitors what's going on. Wow, look at what I keep thinking. I keep thinking that. Why do I keep thinking that? What is the source of that? And is what I'm thinking making me happy? And if it's not making me happy, then why am I thinking it? And is this threat real? Is it real? What's the likelihood of this happening? And again, whether that's in meditation, which is every morning for me for 10, 15 minutes, whether that's walking across our big campus and looking at the trees and monitoring my thoughts and feelings, or whether that's at night when everything is quiet and I go up on the sixth story of our apartment complex and I look out over the city and monitor. Again, I'm monitoring all day and I'm asking those questions, and I'm resonating with a way to be happy.
Wow, that's a lot. You talk about meditation, and could not identify with you even more when you said I can't do meditation. I tried it, my mind was going, but then you said after several attempts, you finally got the hang of it. So let's talk about that.
Well, it was several months. It's 3 months to where you can even, the first 3 months, I urge people, there's 13 weeks of meditation in this book, but the first few weeks, I'm urging people just simply to pay attention to their mind. So it's not even asking you to do anything except pay attention to what's going on in your mind. Look at all the thoughts. Am I what's my dinner plans for the night? What am I ruminating on? What am I upset about? What am I just meditating or surveilling what's on your mind? And that's the first part. Then as you move into meditation. The second part is beginning to find an anchor. Now, for most people, it's their breath. It can be a body scan, it can be nature, it can be, I think I list 7 or 8 things in the book. But if it's your breath, then you, and here's where it gets magical. After about 3 months, you're going, wow, I keep thinking that. I'm going to go back to my breath. And you go back to your breath and you're listening to your breath. And inevitably, within another 3 seconds, you're going to start, your monkey mind's going to go again. And then you go back to your breath and you go back to your breath. 3 months later, you don't have 3 months later, you're knowing when your unconscious mind is speaking up, and you're simply moving away from it, and you can move away from it for hours. But again, it's not something that someone comes in the room. I've never met the person yet who didn't come in and say, I can't do this. I've got a monkey mind. I'm not made for mindfulness. I've not yet met that person. But I've not yet met the person who, after 3 months, after 6 months, cannot become a mindfulness expert. And after 13 weeks, at the end of my book, 13 weeks of meditation, I believe that you'll become an expert.
And see, I love that. I love that because a lot of people were like, "Oh, well, I've tried it once. I can't get to it." But you're like, "Yes, you try it. Your thoughts are going to come up because you're not practicing it. You have to keep going and going and practice until it happens."
And then happiness emerges, because the thing, when I say wake up, you're waking up to the nightmare of your unconscious mind.
Mm.
Your unconscious mind is playing all the time, and it's creating all your feelings, your anxieties, not feeling good about yourself. It's creating a nightmare. And when you wake up to that nightmare and say, oh, that's just my unconscious mind. But here's the place. Here's happiness. Happiness has been in me all along. Happiness was given to me. I'm co-creating. There is a divine source. Happiness has been within me all along. I'm just now able to find it if I wake up to the nightmare of this unconscious mind that's just destroying my happiness.
That is so prophetic. Now we have to go to a brief commercial break, but when we come back, you're going to read part of your book, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
People welcomed me and they knew the pain of the journey that we'd been on because they'd been there too.
Other Parents Like Me is an online community, peer-led, for parents with kids struggling with mental health and or substances.
It's a space that's safe. It feels like I can actually share what's going on.
We offer 15 daily support groups per week and live speaker talks on Thursdays, as well as a monthly expert panel.
We also have a resource hub that has a toolkit. This includes over 1,000 articles, podcasts. There's a glossary with the most recent and relevant terms. And we have a directory that's been vetted.
The overwhelming feeling when we're sitting in a meeting and I'm telling my story and I see others shaking their head, tears falling. You know, they understand this roller coaster and they're along for the ride.
And we are back chatting with Ski, and you're going to read part of your book, There's Another Way to Happiness. So it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Melissa. First of all, I have to apologize to the audience because as I said, I'm dyslexic. So reading can be really, really difficult. So I'm going to start, and if I make some mistakes, just stay with me. This section is from chapter 5, called Our Mind-Made Prisons, and it's called It's Time for a Prison Break. As I reflect on all my past attempts at self-improvement, most have ended in disappointment, or if they did succeed, it was only a small change for a little while. Now imagine if you ceased striving to change yourself and stopped all dissatisfaction with who you are. Would this lead to a passive acceptance of everything within and around you? Is there no alternative between laborious, self-pushing, and stagnant acceptance. Indeed, there is another way, and that centers around awareness and self understanding. This, however, is no easy journey. To truly understand who we are demands complete freedom from all desires to transform yourself into something different. Instead of attempting to change, strive to observe. Study your reactions to people and things without judgment or condemnation, and all desires to reform yourself will cease. Let your observations remain fluid, free from rigid conclusions, open to fresh perspectives from one moment to the next. You'll then witness a marvelous transformation within you. You will be flooded with the light of awareness, and this transparency will enable transformation. Change will occur within and around you, but it won't be instigated by the restless ego that constantly competes, compares, and generates tension, conflict, and resistance between you and the world around you. This new way will produce change that will not be forced or artificial. Instead, it will be natural, organic process rooted in self awareness and understanding. The transformative power of self observation is immense and can unlock a profound sense of peace and commitment. And I'm going to skip to the last paragraph of this chapter. The most crucial step is to sit quietly in meditation and observe how your mind functions. This is the second chapter in the second step, deepening awareness. Become aware of the steady flow of thoughts, feelings, and reactions moving through your mind. Watch this flow for long stretches of time, the way you watch a river or a movie. If you're really curious, you'll find them more absorbing than any movie, more life giving, more liberating. After all, can we be said to be alive if we're not aware of our thoughts or reactions? Without such awareness, there is no freedom. It cannot even be called life. It's a mechanical existence of constantly living with our unconscious me. So watch, observe, question, explore, deepen your awareness, and your mind will awaken, shed all of its layers, and become alert and active. Then magically, the prison walls of your mind will tumble down and you will be free at last.
That is so good. That was not actually one that I had highlighted, but I'm so glad you read that because that is so good. Especially when you talk about the prison walls, because we can actually put ourselves in a prison where we think we can't do it when we actually can. We're taught, I guess, or we have these thoughts since childhood that we can't do something. I can't even imagine what went through your mind knowing that you were dyslexic and 3 years when you were put into that special program in school. And then finally someone realized that you were actually, smart and that it was, you had a learning disability and that you didn't need to be in that program and they kind of pulled you out. So let's talk about that and how we create our own prisons.
Well, many of the prisons, yes, those are the prisons, and what happened in that case, and it was funny because I they gave me an IQ test, and I think I did really well on the IQ test, and and then somebody ran to the building and put me in the A class, and of course I was going to flunk out of the A class because I couldn't read,
Mhm.
but that's the way I got out of that trailer. That being said, the prisons are not only what we can't do and the limits we put on ourselves, but they're the perceptions of ourselves. I say that we build these prisons and the only light we see is there's a teeny window in one corner of the prison. And the only light that we see is out that teeny window. And we have this prison around us. And it's the prison of all the things that have happened to us, all the things that we believe about ourselves, all the childhood trauma, whether we're aware of it or whether it has been suppressed. I talk about shadow work in this book, and I talk about a day that I walked across the campus, meandering, thinking that I was going do a little shadow work and ended up under a tree completely crying in a mope for 2 hours. So there are things in our minds, and there are unconscious things, and there are suppressed things, and we don't need to live there. We don't need to bring them up to live there, but we need to know that they're there. And once we know that they're there, and again, I urge people to work with counselors, especially when that shadow has been really, really traumatic, because you're going to need that help. But then we go there, and then as we feel them, we're free to let go of them.
Mm-hmm.
And once we're free to let go of them, then the walls come tumbling down. The prison walls come tumbling down. As the third step is the art of surrender, or the art of letting go. And we're surrendering these. And then the walls come falling down. We're not looking through a teeny window in the corner of the prison. We're looking at the entire world. And the entire world is, I won't say ours, but our ability to love the entire world. And we're able to co-create. And for me, I am a believer. So we're co-creating with the divine, whether I'm in Darfur in Africa, where I've been in Africa for 25 years, and whether we're building a place where 1 million people are being killed for 100,000 people to run to, no matter how we're loving the world, we are called to wake up and love the world. That's our only purpose. Now, whether we're doing fancy smancy things like it would be perceived I'm doing, every student that walks into my lab, I go, you're not doing science. You may be getting a PhD,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not doing science. You're loving the world. This is social justice. You're loving the world. The science, if you just tell me how you love test tubes and how you can move chemicals around, I'm going to kick you out of my lab. Now, you'll get kicked out the first day. I want to know your passion to love the world, and I want to know how you're going to use this knowledge to change the world and love the world.
I love that. And I'm going to have to share that with my daughter and her husband, because they're both getting their PhD in science. One's getting their PhD in chemistry and the other one's in environmental toxicology. So I'm going to have to share that with them. You talk about shadow work. What exactly is that?
Well, it's a term that's been used in the psychological literature, not so much in the psychological literature, but in the counseling literature. And it's this work that is done typically in a counselor's office to bring up things that have been suppressed. So I talk about in the book about the little boy. I meet myself as a child.
Mm.
And I talk about the child in the corner, and the child, I was legally blind. I was dyslexic. Because I was legally blind, I couldn't play with other kids, even though so for me, I met that little child in a corner, of a room, and I met that little child. And I'm sorry, I get misty even talking about that,
Go right
because
ahead.
that little child was so pitiful. And so those are in us. They never leave us. That little child wasn't being played with, was being bullied, never got chose for the teams, couldn't read, was called dummy or dumbass when he got older. That little child, it was a rough life. And so, what I think for me, the shadow work was the adult me convincing that child I would never leave them. So, so that child would never have to feel like that again.
I applaud you for that. And I applaud you for sharing your story, because I think a lot of us have that kind of story, that they didn't grow up with the best. There's always that persona that they put out to the world, and that you got it all together, but inside we're all kind of like crumbling. So I applaud you for sharing your story.
Well, thank you. You made me cry. I'm doing 2 or 3 interviews a day, and you're the only person who's made me cry. So I'm not sure I'm happy at you or upset with you.
Well, I think I'm going to make you cry a little bit more because let's talk about your son contributed to part of this book. So let's talk about your son.
Yeah, my son is amazing. My son was one of the best athletes in the state of North Carolina, one of the best football players. He played for Mount Tabor High School in Winston-Salem, and driving to the semifinals of the state playoffs, he was in an automobile accident and was paralyzed. Just like the movie Remember the Titans for any of the sports buffs out there. And his world broke apart. His world completely crumbled. And this is in the chapter Wildfires and New Beginnings. And that was a wildfire, and he describes the wildfire. And remember when he first wrote that part of the chapter, and I go, nope, I was there, and that's not what you felt like, and that's not what I felt like. And then he went deep within himself. And if you can read this part of the book without crying, you don't have a heart. But he went through 4 surgeries, got addicted to opiates, 12-year opiate addiction, 3 years homeless, got him to Betty Ford Hazelton. He's been clean for 6 years, and he lives with me, and he's going to law school at the University of Arizona right now. So he's an inspirational speaker all over the country, and just an amazing young man. I'm so proud of him. So proud to know him. My best friend.
Oh, I love that. I can definitely understand that because I mean, when I was reading that as a parent, I was like, oh my gosh, what you must have been going through during that time, especially when you know that addiction wasn't something that he went out and looked for. It was something that happened because of what else happened to him and just trying to get rid of all the pain that he had. And as parents, we just want to take away all our kids' suffering.
Well, and it's particularly devastating. You're in North Carolina. There are rural parts of North Carolina where fentanyl is taken over, and fentanyl is killing children everywhere. It killed 80,000 kids last year. To put that in perspective, the entire Vietnam War of 12 years killed 55,000. It killed 80,000 of our kids last year, and it's doing it primarily in these rural communities. And so for just at the end of his addiction, fentanyl was emerging rapidly, and counselors said either you get him off the street or he'll be dead in 2 weeks, given the rate of opiates he's taking, because he's going to die of fentanyl poisoning. So I know there may be someone listening who's lost their child to fentanyl, or this is serious. This is dead serious. And I'm so sorry if there's someone out there who has. I can't even imagine your pain.
You mentioned wildfires, and that's one of the things that I actually highlighted in the book. It says, the wildfires in our lives are necessary to pave the way for beautiful new beginnings. And I never really thought about that before. But you're right. Sometimes you have to go hit the bottom to get up to the top.
Yeah, pain is the catalyst. Now you can you can respond or react 2 or 3 ways to pain. You can go into despair, and that can really be difficult. Probably the most devastating way to respond is to become a victim. And I talk about that. If you go down the victim road, victimhood is a road that gives back. People go, oh, I'm so sorry for her, and we're all praying for her. And believe me, I'm not putting down praying, but but as I say in the book, take one step too far down the victimhood road. Take one step and you'll never return. But if you don't do those two, like I told someone yesterday, I had a difficult professional thing yesterday, and I looked at him and I said, I am never more dangerous. I am never more dangerous than when you put me in a corner, because I am coming out, and I'm coming out hard, and I'm going to change some things. And this will be a catalyst for profound change. And, the desert here, I love the desert. A North Carolina boy moving to the desert of Tucson, Arizona, and 5 mountain ranges around me, and I hike every weekend. I never imagined this ecosystem and how beautiful it was. And I remember the first year I was here, the entire mountain range, 110,000 acres, burned. I was looking at a towering inferno, 8,000, 9,000 feet of mountain on fire. And I just cried because I said, my playground is gone. My playground is gone. Within 9 months, that desert began to emerge. And within a year and a half, it had emerged in a beautiful and diverse way. And these fires are required at least every 20 years to maintain the beauty and diversity of that ecosystem. What a beautiful metaphor for our lives. What a beautiful metaphor. We can't change. We can't become more diverse. We can't become more beautiful. We can't evolve spiritually and emotionally without those wildfires.
I love that. Now, you talked about being put in a corner. Do you think that's because of all the things that you've had to go through in your life that you come out fighting, as opposed to the little boy that I made you cry about it? And I'm still sorry that you cried about it, but I'm glad you shared your story. But do you think that's because of all the stuff that little boy had to go through? Is that's why you come out fighting now?
I don't know. I think I come out fighting because I have a confidence that, the Buddhists talk about impermanence. And C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite Christian writers, talks about the law of undulation. And basically, they both say the same. They say, if you're going to live this life, there's going to be ups and downs. And if you go ahead and get your mindset in the mindset that no matter who you are, it's going to go up and down. And the only constancy is that it's going to go up and down. And so that's the only that's the only constant in our life. So when I'm at the bottom, I know it's coming back up.
Mm-hmm.
I have a great, great faith that this is coming back up, that I'm going to be able to co-create, and I'm being moved in another direction. And I'm being moved in another direction for the river has gone around a curve, is taking a curve. And that class 5 rapid I just went through was necessary. And I don't know what's on the other side of that curve, but that class 5 rapid that beat the crap out of me was necessary for me to make that turn. And I think it's that confidence that this is where I'm supposed to be, no matter how bad it feels, no matter how much it hurts, no matter how much it feels like a failure. This is where I'm supposed to be, and this is making me in the person that I was designed to be when I was made.
I love that. How long did it take you to get the confidence that you have right now?
Well, it's so funny you should ask, because I lived so much of my life without confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I wrote my first book, I've written 6 books now, and I wrote Inflammation Nation, and it was Simon & Schuster's lead health book in 2005. And I remember they asked me to write an autobiography for the press release. And I wrote an autobiography, and I looked at it and I went, crap, I've spent my entire life from the fear of failure, from the fear of not making it. So I wouldn't say I had confidence. I would say it till my mid 50s, or between 50 and 55, till that fear of failure turned into okay, you know what? I'm not fearing failure. I know that I'm co-creating and I'm doing my best to love the world. And I know that that will be blessed.
Do you think, because I mean, something similar happened to me when I turned 52. Do you think that it's that magical age where like something clicks in our brain, like we don't really care what other people think at that moment? It's like we want to live because we're facing the second part of our lives.
I think you're spot on. I mean, I'm 66. I don't have any time to waste.
Mm-hmm.
If I have any regrets, it took me till age 55 to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wasted so much time, and maybe I didn't waste it. Maybe I needed the beating and the beating and the beating. Maybe I needed the 52-page CV to convince me that wasn't the way to happiness. Maybe I needed all of that to be able to write this book, and that was the whole reason behind all this. But dang, I wish I'd gotten it sooner. Dang, I wish I'd been free sooner. I'd freed myself from that mind-made prison. It would have been so much more joyful, not only for me, but also people I've hurt and people who've hurt me and I've not put proper boundaries around.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have been so much more joyful.
Do you think, you looking back, you could have been would have been a better parent? And maybe, because I know as parents, anytime anything happens to our kids, we kind of, going forward, we think about, we blame ourselves a little bit. Well, we should have done this or we should have done that. Do you think, looking back, if you had that confidence, that maybe things might have been different?
My kids all eventually have turned into be world changers, so I'm so proud of them. But I clearly would have parented differently. I was raised by she's my hero, so don't take this wrong, but I was raised by a very, very strict mother. And I tell people I've been to Darfur, I've been in holes, I've had AK-47s, I've been threatened with my life all through Africa. And I wasn't afraid of but one thing, and that was my mama. And and as I said, she died my hero. But that was the parenting style that I had been given.
Mm-hmm.
And in retrospect, I wouldn't have been more lenient. My kids would always had to be responsible, and I wouldn't have entitled my kids, but I don't think I would have been quite as angry, quite as harsh. It would have been a much more gentle version of myself, still probably doing the same things, still not entitling and being strict, but it would be a more like, oh, really wish you hadn't have done that. That's not going to serve us either one well. And
Mm-hmm.
we're going to need to do this, but it would have involved a lot less anger. And I think the way I did it, I think the actions were appropriate. The anger and reactions were not appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Can your children tell the difference in you once you started building that confidence? Can they look and say, wow, you've grown so much, or wow, Dad, look at you.
Can you see the tattoos?
Uh-huh.
I've got one that I'm about to put on this chest. My kids don't even know who in the world I am. I mean, who is that man? That man is crazy. That man is fun. That man is wild. That man is, yes, yes, my kids, the way my kids talk about me, there'll be a lot to talk about at my funeral. There's not much I won't do. I love sailing. I love, as I said, I had a boat down in the Outer Banks, and so yeah, and there's not much that 25 years in Africa, all around the world. There's not much I won't do, and there's not much I'm afraid of. So yeah, I'm a very, very different man. a very, very no anger, no reactions. Still strong,
Yeah.
extraordinarily strong, but it's manifests itself in a very different way.
And I love that. Now, you mentioned also in your book, this is in chapter 8, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And I love that because most of the time people think that we're stuck in this situation and we can't change it. We can't do anything about it. And I love that.
Well, Carl Jung, who's the father of psychology, modern psychology, had a saying, those things we persist, resist. I mean, those things we resist, persist. And that I found that to be completely true. And in fact, two of my meditations, one is called The Guest House, which is a poem by Rumi, and another is those things that we resist, persist. If we're resisting things harshly, or we're reacting to things, and I use the word react instead of respond. But if we're reacting to things, then we're resisting things in a really, really powerful way. And they will persist. I mean, we will be creating the fire. We are igniting the flames around us. We're igniting the anger around us. We're igniting everything around us that's going to resist us. And so, yes, we change ourselves. We mindfully, it doesn't matter. Like I said, we don't surrender. Surrender is a funny word. Surrender for me is, a lot of people say it's surrendering, you give up, but no, it's not at all. I am a warrior. I mean, anyone who's ever seen me in Africa, I'm a warrior. I don't surrender that part of me. I just surrender my reactions and turn them into responses. And I also know when to go in the cave and lick my wounds and sit back and allow things to happen on their own. I know there's a famous book called Warrior of the Light, and it talks about all the manifestations of a warrior, and it's just a warrior, and it's not always appropriate to stand on the front line and fight something right in the face of it. There's another way.
I love that. Now, I know that a lot of people think that they have to fight all the time. And when do you know, because you just said just a minute ago that you know there's a time to fight and then there's a time to sit down. When did you know personally where, okay, I need to sit down and I need to rethink or reconsider what's going on?
I think for me it's more of the style. The style, I'm not going to react anymore. I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to call you names. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to. We're in a time right now that is really, really disturbing. And I was fortunate or unfortunate enough to come up right in the middle of the civil rights movement in the Deep South. And I remember that. And I remember one scene in particular, and I talked about my mom, how tough she was, but there was another scene I remember, and this scene changed my life because I remember the first day of desegregation, and a lot of my relatives were standing outside of that school, not going to let me go in or the other white kids go in with the little black kids. And I'll never forget my mom uh, pointing her finger at my uncle, and just shouting at him and saying, those little kids in that building are scared. They're scared. And again, cry the second time. Ski,
Sorry.
Ski and Tammy are going to march into that building, and they're going to hold those little children's hands if necessary to make them feel safe. And So that's power. And that's power of a little 5-foot woman having incredible impact on her son and giving her son the ability and the confidence to love and change the world. Those moments, mothers, fathers, those moments change children's lives. Your moments of going along with the crowd, your moments of that doesn't change the world. Your moments for standing up for what's right and standing up for love, that will change your kid forever.
Yes, that is so true. And I think that probably is the reason why you went to Africa and worked, is because of that impact that your mom had as a little boy.
Absolutely. And she always was so afraid because I would go to the worst parts. I went to Sudan and I went to Darfur when there was a genocide, and then I went to the Nuba Mountains. So when Doctors Without Borders left, we would go in. So we were keeping ourselves alive with our relationships. But it was her impact at an early age that allowed me to have such a strong, I won't even say desire, but pulling of God to do the right thing, always do the loving thing.
Now I have to ask, where did your name come from? Because you don't see a lot of people named Ski.
Yeah, well, there's a funny story to that. As I said, we started out poor, but apparently we had one person in the family who had done well, and no one had ever met him, but he was a physician and his name was Ski, and he was in the Raleigh-Durham area. No one had ever met him. But Mom said she named me Ski, hoping I might amount to something. So
And look at what she did. And again, she impacted you that way.
yeah, well, the jury may still be out on that, but but she did impact me, and it's a great story because yeah, it's all a big miracle. I don't know how any of this happened. This is
Yes.
my sixth book. I don't know how I don't know how any of this has happened.
See, but the way she said you would amount to something, you have amounted to something. You have, looking back and seeing all the changes that you have done in your own personal life to affect the world around you, and the way that you teach your students, you are amounting to something. So I'm gonna applaud you, and I'm gonna give you flowers for that. Now our time is almost up. Is there anything that you would like people to remember about this interview, or something that maybe we didn't touch on that you would like to talk about in the last couple minutes?
I guess the last thing I would say, and it's going to sound harsh, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you truly want to be happy for the rest of your life, and I don't know what age you are, but if you truly want to be happy for the rest of your life, you must wake up. You must wake up, and you must wake up away from this nightmare of your unconscious mind. You must wake up. For me, the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is fear. You must wake up. If you're fearful, if you feel fear all around you, if you wake up, it's likely not the real situation, but a situation that you've created within you, and it's impacting you and everybody around you. So wake up to love.
I love that. And now, where can people find you at?
Uh, Tucson, Arizona. No, I'm just kidding. I just, it's Dr. Ski Chilton on Facebook. It's Ski Chilton on Facebook. Another way to happiness.com. It's at Dr. Ski uh, Chilton on Instagram. It is another way to happiness on Instagram as well. So just some of the places.
And where can people find your book? There's Another Way to Happiness.
At Amazon, and it's doing well after the first couple of weeks just on Kindle downloads. It was the #1 spirituality and personal transformation book.
Wow.
And so
Congratulations.
it's doing well. And we're about to release the Audible version here in 2 or 3 weeks. So it's all been, again, it's another miracle.
Can they find also your other books on Amazon as well?
They can. And what I would suggest if they want is the last book was The Rewired Brain, and that's in every major airport in the country, every major grocery store. And so it's a book on, as a woman told me, not too quick the story, she said, your book, The Rewired Brain, told me why I was so messed up in all the aspects of my life. She said, your Another Way to Happiness showed me how to fix being messed up in every way. So The Rewired Brain is a very popular book. It's, like I said, I just came through Dallas Airport. I would just ask people. It's in London. It's Israel. I mean, so it's everywhere and sold over 30,000 copies. So it's a very popular book. And then, but there is another way. The happiness is the antidote to The Rewired Brain.
So if you've read The Rewired Brain, definitely pick up Another Way to Happiness,
Yeah.
because
Yeah, because the woman actually said, I hate you. You told me why I was messed up, but you didn't provide a solution. And she was right. Another Way to Happiness is the solution.
do you have anything else in the works coming down?
No, there's several books in my head. There's at least 3 books. Um, uh, there's a book called This Ain't Easy that I'm thinking about. There's another book. I'd like to get into my faith just a little bit more, and there's I'm a little upset with the way that Jesus has been portrayed, and so there's a book in the works thinking about that. There's another book that's called Beach People, because I love the beach and the Outer Banks, and Beach People is a book about what it looks like after you found another way to happiness. You asked, am I different now than I was? Then Beach People is a description of what I am now.
Oh, I love that. And whenever any of these books come out, please consider coming back on. Reach out to me, because I would love to have you back on, because this conversation, even though I made you cry, I actually, I love this conversation. This is one of my top 5 conversations I've ever had on the show.
You are a delight. Thank you for doing what you do, and you're such a blessing to. And I'm so happy you're in North Carolina, and I'm so happy you're in that area of North Carolina. You're just an absolute blessing. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ski, for coming on and for sharing your story, for writing this book, for writing the antidote to the book that everybody was mad at you about writing. Now, I'm actually going to go back and read that first book to see why people were going to say that, because you've really got me thinking about that.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, I will put in the show notes wherever all the places we talked about, as well as some of the books that he talked about that he actually read that he has not written, because I took a little bit of notes down here while we were talking. Please like, review, and subscribe. And if you love this episode, please comment, because I know Ski would love the feedback as well. So until next time.
Thank you, thank you, North Carolinians. I really appreciate being able to talk to you, and I miss North Carolina, and thank you all.
So until next time, guys, keep chatting, and remember, there's another way to happiness. Bye.